Welcome, everyone. My name, if you don't know, is Brittany. I am the A&R and Community Coordinator here at Airbit, and I'm super, super excited for our guest today. We are with attorney Lee Rankin this afternoon. Lee, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
For having me. Can you hear me?
Of course, of course.
Okay.
And just really quickly, I want to speak. Yes, I can hear you. This opportunity and this how Lee and I met, to be honest, speaks very fondly to the importance of building relationships and just networking with people. I actually met Lee, if you guys watched the Women's History Month panel that we had a few weeks ago. I met Lee, or was introduced to Lee through Paula Moore, and she spoke super highly of you and was like, you have to meet Lee. You're going to love her. She's so great. And then sure enough, after our first conversation, we hit it off. And I'm just really excited to have you here and just to kind of learn from you and for you to be able to share your knowledge with our community. So again, thank you so much for joining us. Attorneys, in case you guys don't know, have very, very busy schedules. So we're going to hop right into it. Lee, if you don't mind, just kind of share a little bit about like your background, your education, how you got into law, and then specifically just touch on your interest and knowledge of like entertainment and business law.
Absolutely. So I'm start with my aunt, my mother's youngest sister, was an executive. She helped Bob Johnson start Black entertainment television, back in the 80s. And I grew up partly in Washington. Then Black entertainment television, BET, was based here in DC in Georgetown. And so, with my aunt being the executive vice president of marketing for BET, I grew up around the music business. I remember there was a popular video show on BET called Video Soul, and Donnie Simpson was the VJ. And that was kind of like the whole beginning of television being like a main part of television being music videos, and which is, we're not now we're like YouTube, but back TV programming, MTV, BET, all these stations. So that was a really big deal. So I had some exposure to the music industry at that point, and that whet my appetite. I wound up going to Spelman College in Atlanta in '92, and that was at a time when you had, the rise of, Puff Daddy, producer Dallas Austin, Jermaine Dupri. These were 20-thing music industry dynamos that were producers, owned record labels, and just big trendsetters. And, at that age, considered music models. So it became a real path to be in the music business and wanting to be an executive in the music business. I also in college wound up being in a romantic relationship with Dallas Austin, who was considered like a super producer, like a top level producer. Yeah. This was back in the 90s. And at that point, a 4-point royalty, commanding like $100,000 per track. So I got introduced to that whole lifestyle. At that point, I wound up going to law school. I went to Emory University. I graduated from Emory, but I wound up taking an internship, a legal internship in Fordham, so that in a day and finish up school at night. At that time, if you wanted to have an internship at a record label, you had to work while you were in school. They wouldn't give just the internship for the summer. So it was like a real investment. Interesting. So mostly kids that went to New York law schools were getting, because the record business was really in the 90s, it was centralized in New York City. That was where the music industry was. Now, then it started to migrate, and then, the South became a center, and Atlanta became an epicenter of music industry with, LaFace Records. And then now it's kind of concentrated in Los Angeles. However, with the pandemic, everything is remote. It's a new opportunity. It's not necessarily about, but so that is like a long, but because of, like you said early on, relationships that I had, personal relationships, formed my professional, pretty much my destiny, my professional destiny. And I wound up being in the business.
Nice. So, if you didn't know, Airbit is a producer-based platform. And so when we were initially thinking about, well, what are some of the questions that we can ask? One of the ones that was brought up to me was how should producers consider looking for attorneys? And I never even considered that being something that like producers had to consider, or that was maybe hard or challenging, or that people would have questions about. So I would love to kind of get your insight on that. How should producers go about looking for an attorney? What are some key things to consider? Are there certain qualifications that they should look for? Does it matter the specific type of practice area that the attorney practices in? Is that of importance? What are your thoughts on that?
That is a great question. So like you said at the opening, the music industry, like the entertainment industry and probably like most professional industries, it's all about relationships. And so in my humble opinion, the industry is very cliquish. And so, it's very important who you associate yourself with. And I would think associate yourself with people who are up and coming in the industry, who are being smart about the industry. And through those relationships, you're going to find out who those people are using to handle their legal work. And it's not just about who they're using, but how that person feels about the trajectory of that relationship. If do they feel confident? Is this somebody that is helping them to understand how to maneuver through the industry? And so I think that is really key. I think it's important that you work with someone that has a good reputation. I think it is very important. You do not want to have a lawyer who works in, let's see, personal injury law, try to come in and negotiate your producer agreement. It's a entirely different language. What people need to understand is that lawyers are generally practice-based. And so you want an experienced lawyer, you want someone that has experience and relationships in that practice area. I have an unusual career because I took a break from the music business when I got married in my 30s, had children. I left Atlanta, moved to Memphis, and they're really for the first pretty much 10 years of my adult life, I was exclusively in the music business, whether it was I was working at a record label. I also worked at Violator Management, which was the top hip hop, management. This is where artists like, he was being represented by a guy named Chris Lighty. Mona Scott was the other co-owner of Violator, and we know Mona Scott has. And so this is where like, the monster, the big people in rap were at this management company where I worked, and then leaving New York, going to Atlanta, and working at the law practice group, Atlanta, working with some of the clients that the law firm I worked at represented, like Jim and Terry Lewis, and represented out their tremendous career. One time, I don't know if you've ever seen like the TLC story, but how they were saying,
I'm a huge TLC fan. Let me tell you,
those same lawyers that represent LaFace. Yeah, so You me too.
Yeah.
So the same lawyers that represented LaFace, Arista, Clive Davis, Pebbles, and TLC was my boss. So I mean,
Fire.
so he was the
Fire.
leader of this practice group. I mean, also went on to represent the Country Music Awards, the Grammys. So I just had all these experiences early in my career, took a break, moved to Memphis. You go to Memphis, I'm going using lawyers in Memphis. There was no real entertainment business when I moved there. And so I did not have that opportunity. And this was a time before things were remote. It was all about, no, I need a lawyer in New York that is going to be able to be up in of me being in the music industry. So I wound up transitioning into working in local government for about 12 years. And then fast forward about 3 years ago, the industry really started to blow up, even in Memphis with, Yo Gotti, Moneybag. There's a lot of other things that are developing in the Memphis area. So I decided I was going to relaunch, launch my company, Lee Rankin Group. And so I began working with new artists, trying to get my feet wet and build my company up. I kind of got lost in the question. Oh, practice area. So the fact that I'm able to do government work and I'm able to do music law is because I spent considerable amount of time in industries. But what I will tell you is that when you do bigger deals, and some of it is because I have not been practicing in the music industry constantly and knowing all the new things, with the digital revolution, a lot of things have changed from when I left the business. So I needed to associate with lawyers that knew everybody at the labels, that knew all the great tricks that you need to know to be able to get my client a great deal. And so I would associate myself with those lawyers to make sure that I was providing a premium service. Because if you get a lawyer that is not doing that, or that does not practice primarily in the industry and doing deals on a regular basis, there's a lot of things they're going to miss.
Yeah.
Because it's really really another language. It's really, do you see what I'm saying? It's not like, oh, law's a law. You really need to understand the base everything, copyright law, and so understanding of that, and you're not working with someone that's going to help walk you through that, you're not going to be able to do justice to your client.
Absolutely. So having worked in entertainment as long as you have, what are some of the most common mistakes that you see from music artists and producers in the industry today? And this could be their contracts, this could be who they're talking to, who they're not talking to, what the agreements are saying. What are some of the most common mistakes that you're seeing so far?
One of the things is that this is a real brand name industry. I mean, I will never forget when, when I was younger, like Public Enemy, KRS-One, I mean, music could be conscious. It wasn't all about, but, when you had the rise, like Kim, it started turning into like Versace, and everything was about, everything needed to be designer, everything became, and so also, attorneys. So taste of success in the business already want to be, high heavyweight. You know what I mean? And so then they want to associate themselves with the most brand name attorney. So, these law firms, the thing about the law, about also being entertainment law that I've learned is, there's not a whole lot of money. It's a lot of smoke and mirror. And so what happens to a lot of lawyers is that they are managing so many client relations that it's very hard to give the hand holding that a new artist or a new producer, a newer person, or anyone really desires to have. So when you have a busy lawyer, then they don't have time with distribution. And, I see these independent artists that already, see themselves or, maybe they have, been on a reality TV show, or maybe they're on, one of these, shows like Stars or Empire. And now, they want to be a recording artist and they're releasing independently. And then they have these really high powered lawyers that also represent, the hugest stars, that there are. And so, these are smaller dollar deals, and it's not billable hours. It's not making, their firm a lot of money, but usually these big lawyers aren't going to turn, up and coming client away, because who knows,
right.
hit the jackpot. So here you have, you're up and coming, you're not commanding huge fees. And so, but you have this really, really important, busy lawyer that just doesn't have time to come in and close your deals. So I see that quite a bit. Let's see. Another thing I saw, and I don't know if you wanted to segue into that, is like how, like the other thing is, you have to understand that laws, we have to, especially in entertainment, you have to kill what you eat, right? You're trying to close things, you're trying to, times it's about quantity over quality, and they're doing, unless you're at a point where you're having higher paying, fees coming in on a regular basis.
Yeah, like all big names.
Yeah. Right. So a lot of lawyers, what they'll do is they'll structure an arrangement where they're going to get 5% of all income that comes in. Because sometimes you might have situations where it's like a cease and desist situation. And it's not, it's not something where there's a fee involved. Do you see what I'm saying? But you have retained this attorney and you're on an income basis, for all fees that come in. So let's say, for anything that you get 5%, even if they really didn't even do anything, but you have a retainer agreement with them in place. And some smart, savvy lawyers have relationships, with, say, your business manager. So they know anytime you're getting any checks coming in, the business manager is already, sending them the 5%. And that is your agreement that you have with this lawyer, right? Well, the idea is when you have a non-paying thing, they're still supposed to prioritize that because you're percent of everything. Does that make sense? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So you're not, absolutely. So you don't have to pay them on the non-paying thing because you're paying them on everything that's paying. And right. Some people that doesn't seem fair. I know a very, very popular R&B artist right now who fired, because the manager felt, or they felt, that arrangement wasn't fair. But you don't consider that there's a lot of things that lawyer day-to-day basis and with your manager. And so that's something to, to consider. Otherwise, most lawyers, if you don't have an arrangement like that, most lawyers are not going to be at the phone to answer y'all for something that's just not billable for them. And so I think another thing that people get confused is the role of the manager versus the role of the lawyer. And I don't want to I don't want to overstep questions that you may have. Important relationship that a producer and artist has is with the manager, and to have the manager do a lot of things that are really kind of like administrative that you don't have to pay a lawyer to do. Manager already has a relationship with you where they get a percentage of what comes in based on whatever your management arrangement is. And so have them do a lot of that stuff and reserve, the legal things that have, your intellectual property, and explain deals. Leave that where you don't have to. So many times people them, and I'm like, to do some paperwork for you, like read or get your smart friend to be your manager, and they can do all of that. That's not something that you need a lawyer to handle. So those are some of the issues that I see.
That's really good information. I never really considered the importance. I mean, I knew that you obviously should have a manager and an attorney, but I think that's really good to kind of dive into the importance of having both, and then kind of knowing the duties of what the manager should be doing to kind of take a little bit of that burden off of the attorney. I think that's really valuable.
And that's the
I do
same
want to
thing.
get into.
You don't have to have the superstar manager. You just need to have a smart manager that is mission oriented. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You touched on this a little bit earlier, so I just want to go back to it because I know we hard pressed for time. But let's talk about contracts a little bit because in my time, like just working in music, working with artists, working with producers, especially those who are younger, there is a lot of hesitance in regards to signing contracts. A lot of newer artists and newer producers these days don't want to get trapped into bad deals. Like you hear, back in the day, there were a lot of bad deals that were going on that some artists, old school artists, are still stuck in now, right? So there's a lot of pushback sometimes to contracts. No one really wants to put their signature on anything. How important are contracts in the music industry? And what are some of maybe the best contracts that can protect producers?
Well, okay. The way I always hear it said is contract really comes into play when there's a breakdown in communication, when things go wrong. That's when you look to the contract to enforce to enforce the obligations and the rights and duties. You see, and so I think that having contracts and having good contracts is of the utmost importance. I mean, into terms of, I think, layman terms, if you if you have a custody arrangement, or if you have a child with someone that you are no longer able to communicate with well, you have an agreement, at least you have something that you can enforce. You see what I'm saying? It's not like a free for all, or I thought this and I thought that. No, you don't have to think about it, because here it is reduced to a writing. You have some place where you can enforce. So, if everything is gravy, there's no problems, you don't have to operate on the terms of it. Sometimes you can operate, but when things are not going well, at least you can have a default, in terms of having something that explains what everybody's supposed to be doing, and what everybody is owed, how to account for things, where, how, if there's something that goes wrong or you're owed something, you usually have venue, and how do you enforce this document. And so some of the most important things that I think also where the manager comes in play is that you really want to have somebody that is going to register your copyrights. For instance, if you're not with a publisher, you see what I'm saying? So, because a publisher will handle, or even the record, if you have a record deal, most of the record deals will say that you're responsible for doing it, but but you also give them, a power of attorney to handle it in case it's not done, because really you're assigning the sound recording to the record label. So they have all types of departments that go in and register all these things. If if you do not have a record deal or a publishing deal at this point, you're self-published or you're independent, then you're going to have to create those mechanisms, and you're going to have to register, with all of, the agencies that exist so that you can collect your royalties, which are so many different types of royalties that come into when you have intellectual property rights in your creation. So
Yeah.
I would say that for a producer, the most important thing is, for instance, if you participate with others and you collaborate in creating music, and you do not have a, then anyone can basically stop, send a cease and desist or takedown and say, I own, you equally own, the sound recording and the copyright. And so it's very important to document as early as possible when you're collaborating, possibly in the studio. And right now, there are a lot of apps that exist, like song splits. There's a number of different apps that exist where when you're in the studio, you all can agree and basically have an agreement electronically that indicates what each person's interest is in the song. And of course, if there are other contributors that you have not accounted for, it's going to be reduced, to cover that other collaborator. Do you see what I'm saying? But at least as between those, parties, you all have an understanding of what interest is, and don't have to. That's not going to slow down and that work when you're trying to get it into the marketplace. So that is very important. So I would say like a song split arrangement, and then also a producer agreement. So what happens is, if you're you're just grinding it out, a lot of times people do what they call a work made for hire. And it's basically where you're commissioned to create a work, but you have basically given over the authorship and the interest in the intellectual property to a third party, and you do not have an ongoing interest. You basically sold it for a flat fee or for no fee, And so that happens, that happens because, I mean, a lot of times with independent artists, you're just trying to get in there. Most people's first few deals, the beginning of everybody's career sucks. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of, you pay your dues. And a lot of times, like you hear, a lot of people in the music say that, they started off and, the business wasn't right. But the smart person learns from those mistakes, right? But, a lot of times people want to come in the industry like they're a super producer, but you're not, and you may prevent yourself. If you're too much of a so-called diva and you want to hold, sometimes they say 10% of 100% is better than 100% of $0.
Of zero. Yep.
So you have to start somewhere. But you want to start somewhere, and somewhere oftentimes is where you're, you might take an L in the beginning, but because of that L, you're now in the room. You now have, I don't know if you all saw the Jesus, was it the Genius documentary,
Right. With Kanye West.
Exactly. Yeah. You saw his humble beginnings, right? And how far he came. I mean, we're familiar with that, right? And so, but he got smarter and smarter and smarter and smarter, and stayed talented. I mean, he got smarter about the business. I mean, I don't know. I'm not gonna say he's so smart in his personal life, but he started off where he was real humble, and that he was humble, and so he didn't get a bad reputation, is what I'm trying to say. Now, I don't know about now, but when he was younger, just being humble and just having that work ethic and being creative is going to open all the doors. And so the best part is that you're learning in that process. Don't, or you're putting smart people around you that are going to help you to grow your assets in your creative wheelhouse. So you know, but you're
Yeah.
always preparing for your big right people that know the right things that are going to help you to protect your assets.
Nice. Nice. So I just have one more quick question, and I see a lot of people who are watching this live. Thanks you guys for tuning in. Are kind of wondering where they can get templates for some of these agreements, where they can get more information. And I know that you told me you have a few resources that you wanted to share with the community. So let's see what you got to see if maybe some of these can kind of help people out and are what they're looking for.
Okay. Template wise, I need to put a little more thought into that. That's a great question. And I meant to do a little more research. I'm going to have, full transparency that, I'm still working with a few new artists or, but for the most part, I have kind of moved into, I'm doing more like a gaming and like virtual reality work and working with like influencers.
Nice.
So I'm not doing as much work on the other side. I'm now working more with the bigger companies, with creatives to
Yeah.
obtain licenses, and so that we can use, basically their compositions or whatever
Yep.
intellectual property, licensing that to use along with the products that I'm representing. So I'm not as much on that side because I mean, quite honestly, it's a grind, when you're working with a lot of new artists and there's not a lot of money involved.
Yeah.
And it can be emotionally draining. You know what I'm saying? And so as you get older,
Yeah.
that's why, I don't want to say, that's why I say, like, get somebody that's really enthusiastic about your career and wanting to learn. So template wise, I know, well, what I'll do is we can jointly share some information. I'll provide it to you through Airbit so we can, get that information out. But I don't have that for you right now. But what you could also do is, reach out to a lawyer that you do know that has a good reputation, if they will craft just a basic producer agreement for you. Now, I will say that if you're doing, and that's kind of if you're independent space. If you are producing for an artist that's signed to a label, the artist attorney is going to provide that producer agreement. So you just need a lawyer on your side. So the way that the music industry works now is that the artist attorney has to provide and negotiate the producer agreements on behalf of the artist and deliver those to the record label so they can get paid. So it's not really necessarily the producer's responsibility to have their producer agreement. When you're in the independent space and you're, maybe selling your beats or whatever, that's when you more so need to have a form. And I would recommend that you maybe work with, not the biggest attorney, the difficult one, but somebody that is in your community that other people, other artists that are working are in, are working with that attorney, and that they probably have a template that, sell you, and then you can keep it and just, you're not going to change that much. It's like your percentage, what the advance is. I mean, there's, there are some stepped up things that can change, but for the most part, if you're a newer producer, your negotiation powers are not going to be, they're not going to be that expansive. They're going to offer you this is what you're going to, you see what I'm saying? But you can, but some producers will give you what they call stepped up, like different things. So you'll get a form, and if you can get this, they'll provide you like that in. But like what I don't like about
that makes sense.
buying agreements is it's never one size fits all. That's why you need to have a lawyer. You know what I'm saying? or if not, at least
Right.
have a manager. Most of
Yeah.
these managers know as much as these lawyers do because it's the same deal over and over again, the same deal points you're negotiating. So a savvy manager that's good with
Right.
paperwork will be able to negotiate even your producer agreements if it's the same type of deal over and over again. So it's just about getting a form, getting a manager. That's resources. What one of them is, everybody knows this book, All You Need to Know About the Music Business by Donald Passman. It is such a good book. I mean, and the way that you use the other one, it's a
I
lot
have that
thicker.
book.
It's a lot thicker, but man, is it have so much good information and forms. I mean, they might have a producer agreement form in here. It's called Music, Money, and Success: The Insider's Guide to Making Money in the Music Business. It's written by Jeff Brabeck and Todd Brabeck. And the way that you use these books, see, a lot of people, they're like, I'm not going to read that book. I get it. You don't have to read the book. What you want to do is you want to go to the end. You want to go to the table of contents first, right? Generally, read the first chapter. Just read the first chapter because it'll give you an overview, and it's really good information, and it's only what, like 6 pages. Okay, you can read 6 pages. Chapter of these books, you get a table of contents, and you see that you actually need to get information about. A novel, you know, if you want to, go a resource book, you know, like if you're a mechanic or if you're trying to figure out something about your car, right? You don't read the whole the driver's manual. You go to the table of the index and you find the thing that you need to do, and you go to that. And when I'm telling you that this book will give you better information than most lawyers will be able to. Lawyers, we're smart and everything, but we're not like machines. You know, we don't have every little thing in our head. We have to go back and refresh as well. So if you own these 2 books, you really have most of the information that you need. You just might, some people prefer to feel like they have somebody holding their hand. But having the right circle around you and a smart manager, I'm telling you, a lot of these managers can run circles around these lawyers. And I meet music executives all the time. Some of the biggest music executives that ever lived have told me that they wish that they were lawyers because they love the art of the deal. They know just never went to law school. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely. And I'm looking at the comments, and some of the people who are watching said that they've just put some of those books in their Amazon cart. So already proven to be very useful.
Oh, the other thing we didn't talk about, we talked about like royalties and everything. And when you're looking these things up, make sure you look up sound exchange, because you know, basically that is a money stream, revenue stream, broadcast digitally, you know. So unless you are signed up with that, you're gonna miss out on that revenue. And so, you know, everything is digital now. So you really need to be tapped in to sound exchange. So definitely keep that in mind. Google is your best friend. Google is your best friend. Google is my best friend.
Yep.
I Google everything. And especially with the entertainment business, Google, YouTube, you know, information is there. It is easily accessible.
Yep. Absolutely. Well, Lee, I just wanted to say thank you again so much for your time, your knowledge, your gems, your tips. Can you remind us again where we can find you on Instagram and your group?
Absolutely. My company is Lee Rankin Group, and go by L. My tagline is Live in LRG. Are you living large? And I can be found on Instagram and Facebook. Well, Instagram at Lee Rankin Group. And my website is www.leerankingroup.com.
Nice. Awesome. Thank you, everyone who tuned in. Just a quick reminder, next week we have Firebeat Friday Light. The 29th, we have the big Firebeat Friday. Next week, we also will be interviewing Miss Madley, and she's going to be talking with us about sync licensing. So make sure you guys come back, tune in next Thursday. We'll have some more information about that in our Discord. Other than that, you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time.